Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt Santee. If you are on Facebook, you might want to check out today's guest. I've learned so much and been so excited about the things she's been posting that I invited her on the show. So welcome, Kelsie Olds.
I'm super excited to be here.
Yay. Kelsie, tell folks about yourself, please.
So I do online advocacy under the name the Occupational Therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I am an occupational therapist. I work in pediatrics. I'm in a school setting right now, although I have hopped around a lot in the past. But schools is really where my heart and my passion is.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the online work I do is in the realm of OT domain, like what all OTs talk about, but then I also kind of overlap with just kind of child development and parenting coaching and stuff like that in general too, that isn't necessarily just contained within OT.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm learning so much from occupational therapists the last 5 or 6 years. So right now I'm a early childhood program chair and professor at a community college in Indiana. And but before that, I was at Purdue University in some early childhood clinics for the speech, language, and hearing department. And had never really thought about occupational therapists being something for children.
It's not as much well known as speech or physical therapy. We somehow are like the forgotten triplet.
Right. But when I find you all out in the internet world or social media world, I learn so much. So what I'm saying is I need you and people like Greg Santucci and other playful occupational therapists to write more books for me.
Okay.
I can't find good books.
I'll put it on my to-do list.
Write a book for me, please, so that I can dig in.
It'll say the dedication is to Heather.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that too. So anyway, Kelsie, I already said that I love your posts so much, but one this week really caught my attention, and the comments were so as you would expect them to be on this topic, kind of all over the place, and you did such a nice job of being down in the conversation. But you were talking about consequences, so because we have to start with a quote, this is the first sentence of your post from a couple days ago. So when would that have been? June 21st-ish, 2020.
Yeah,
if people want to go find it. You said, I think we would actually all be fine if we would drop the word consequences from our vocabularies entirely. And when I read just that sentence, I could like hear the collective gasping.
I know, like complete anathema to the any adult interacting with any child world.
Yeah. So make your case. What are you talking about?
So and it came from I am a part of a lot of parenting groups, both like to ask questions and to learn and all of these things, and I just feel like I see so much conversation where people are like, help me figure out the natural consequences for such and such, or my kid did XYZ. What consequences would make sense for that? And it first of all, if you're going by anybody's definition of there's like several different parenting frameworks that teach, well, there's punishment, which is arbitrary, and then there's natural consequences, which is just what happens naturally, and then there's logical consequences, which is when either like whatever happens naturally isn't allowable as parents. Like you can't be like, the natural consequence of going in the street is you get run over by a car. Now you've learned your lesson, Yeah. So so logical consequences is the thing that parents should do when when either the natural consequence isn't safe and allowable, or I feel like people don't say, but I feel like the unspoken thing is, or if the natural consequences aren't bad enough,
right?
your kid's not learning your lesson enough from whatever would naturally happen. Just do something logical to hurt and punish them.
Right. I mean, let's be honest. What we're talking about is something that will make them feel bad or make them sad.
Yeah, exactly. Which is like, and I said in the post, I'm glad that we've societally decided to move away from kid did something I don't like, I get to revenge myself upon them in whatever way I see fit.
Revenge is a good
it's
word.
Like we've taken a step, like a tiny little step, but we've just walked over to like, kid has done something I don't like, I get to revenge myself upon them in a logical and like reasonable manner as deemed by society.
Yeah. Yeah. I think about that a lot, that it's so harsh to say. And I can acknowledge that most of these questions from parents or even people, early childhood teachers or whatever, most of it comes from a good place. They feel like they need to teach, they feel like they need to protect or whatever. But if you don't stop and make what's implicit in your brain explicit,
right,
you'll never reflect on it. You'll never think differently about it. And so that's why what I think your post really did was make some of that really implicit bias against children.
It's
more explicit and make people think and talk about it.
I know it's very provocative language. I don't mean to imply that like everyone who's ever tried to, teach their child something or stop their child from doing something that they feel like is dangerous or anything like that is just doing it because they're like a power hungry dictator. Like that's not like that's not what I think, and it's also not what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And I just think that it can be coming from a good place or like meaning well, and it can still be like rooted in a framework that I feel like we don't just need to like swap out one thing and sub it in with another in the framework. We need to like abandon the framework is the thing. And after making that post, I like because when I write a post, it might be very much in advance or it might be just a little bit in advance, but it's usually I almost never write something and then post it right away. And so when I write it, I'm in like one headspace because I'm thinking about what I'm writing and all this. And then by the time that it posts, I have had more and more time to think about it or whatever, but it's only been a conversation in my own head. So it's almost like a whole second conversation happens when people respond to it and I interact with people in comments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so for the past couple of days since the post posted, then I've been walking around thinking about all of my own like second wave of thoughts and stuff. And I came up with this analogy that's like absolutely bonkers. So it's just like go on an absolutely bananas ride with me for a moment.
Excellent.
But I was like, well, so okay, imagine that there's like a whole entire society, a whole human society, and the way that anybody like gains nutrition is via like powders that have been like synthesized by scientists or whatever. Maybe it's an alien race and we landed on their planet and we find out that the way that they get nutrition is that they have a powder and they mix it with water and they drink the water, and it gives them all of their nutrients. But it tastes terrible and nobody enjoys it, and it's like completely like a necessity thing for prolonging life. And so like I show up to their society and I'm like, did you guys know that there's like other ways that people can like get nutrition? Like you could get nutrition by like eating like a piece of cake or a hamburger or like there's like pleasurable things out there. And then they're like, oh yeah, you're right, this is really terrible and everybody hates it. I know, we'll mix the powder with juice so that it's like slightly more palatable. And I'm like, but that's not what I was saying. I was saying that you could take it entirely. And they're like, well, no, but you have to get nutrition by mixing powder with liquid.
Yeah.
But you're right, we should take away the water and we should replace it with juice. And I'm like, no, I'm saying like eat a pizza. Like join me, eat a snack. It's a fun time, And so that's where I'm like, that's what I feel like. It's like, oh yeah, you're right. We shouldn't just like enact whatever punishments. We shouldn't hit children. We shouldn't, like send them away from us. We shouldn't, but we do still need to figure out how to swap out hurting them extremely with like hurting them a little bit, but like a reasonable amount. And it's like, no, I'm saying you don't have to hurt children to learn things. Nobody has to be hurt to learn things.
Yeah. But you're talking about strong language and provocative language, and that's such a good analogy that it threw me off for a minute. I was having so much fun with it.
Now you're thinking about pizza. I get it. It throws everybody
Pizza.
off.
I've already used up my one pizza night for the week, though. So. But I don't think any adults are like, yes, I need revenge. I must seek justice or whatever.
Right.
But you say things like, well, you can't just let them get away with it. So it's like you're just grabbing attention with a different word for something.
Well, and I don't want to make anybody feel called out at all. So I'm trying not to use any examples that anybody specifically did in the comments. So I'm trying to think of either like a hypothetical or like an example from my own childhood. But like, because I was raised in a traditional, like normal, parenting, punitive like mindset.
Right.
And there were several parents who like asked me with specific examples, like, okay, like I get what you're saying, but like I told my kid to do this and my kid forgot to do this, and maybe they even like gave them extra chances. Like I reminded them and they forgot again, and it was important, and I reminded them again and they forgot again. And so I didn't know what else to do. So I did something that I knew would bother them, even if I don't, I know when I say hurt, people think of like corporal punishment or like really dramatic stuff. I did something that I knew would be upsetting to them.
Right.
I did something that I had to use you have to fall back on, because I'm bigger than you and I can. Like if you're going to take something away from somebody, if you're going to tell somebody that they can't do something or block their access to something that they have, like the only kind of relationship in which you can do that and it like be societally okay is a parent, a parent child, or maybe teacher child, but adult child relationship.
Yeah.
And people were like, so, they couldn't have this thing for 2 days, or they couldn't do this privilege that they usually have. And now they remembered the thing or whatever. So what are you saying I should have done differently?
Yeah.
And it's not that I think that those people are unreasonable or terrible or, horrible parents or ruining their kid for life or anything like that. But I kind of broke down I was like, in a parallel universe, you said to your kid, like, okay, I wanted you to remember this. And you forgot. So I do something that hurts you or bothers you a little bit. And maybe now next time you'll remember. In a parallel universe, maybe next time they also forget, like there's no guarantee that this worked or whatever.
Yeah.
In a parallel universe, maybe without you punishing them, then they like still remember, because this time talking with you about it made them remember, or they're at the level of maturity where their body was ready for it. In a different parallel universe, maybe you don't punish them because you don't believe in it or whatever, and they also still forget and need reminded again. Kids just need help with things again. Like it's like it's not that I'm saying, this is absolutely bonkers. Where did you come up with this idea from? Because I know where you came up with this idea from. It's like a mega societal idea, but I am saying that I don't think that the cause and effect is as strong as people think it is. Because it could also, in another parallel universe, you do this and it really ruptures something in your relationship, and the kid doubles down on the thing that you didn't like, because there are kids who are more naturally desperate to be compliant, and then there are kids who are more naturally like desperate to be autonomous, and both of those are like normal child development appropriate like, I hate the word behaviors because it's so.
Me too.
Another word that
gets use it.
I was using it in a literal sense. Those are both appropriate behaviors for children to have, but I don't mean it as a euphemism for misbehaviors.
Right.
But, they're both appropriate actions for a
there
kid
you
to
go.
have. To seek autonomy is an appropriate action for a kid, and to seek compliance and connection with their adult is an appropriate action for a kid. And some kids will do one or the other.
Yeah. I think part of it is that it's just harder to do it a different way. It takes a little bit more, I'll say, skill. I don't mean that as name calling to the person that's hard for or whatever, but it does take some understanding of what's really happening and some effort on the adult's part to try and understand what's really happening. And that's why it's hard, because we think, well, I could just have this recipe and then I don't have to stop and think it through. I don't have to put so much time and effort into it every time. It's just automatic. But like in the description, the example you just gave of they asked the child to do something and the child forgot, there's so much that we could be like, is it even appropriate to expect that they'd remember at this point?
How many things in my life do I forget?
Exactly. That's the other thing I was thinking.
Punishes me for them.
While you're talking, I locked myself out of my office at work 4 times this week.
That's a lot of times.
I'm 52. That is a lot of times. And that's not even an exaggeration. By this morning, I just walked into the main office and they just like didn't even look at me and handed me the master key. So, but I laugh about it and everyone thinks that's just a quirky thing about Heather. No one drew up any consequences for me. For the consequence was I'm embarrassed because I have to go ask for the key again.
And if somebody wanted to like actually, if it was a big problem and somebody needed to legitimately make an action plan with you about like solving it, if their first step was to be like, if this ever happens again, this is how we will punish you, versus like, hey, is there like a hook we could put up that you could put your key on? Or like, is there if we put it on a lanyard for you, would that help you wear it? If
my husband had similar suggestions.
If somebody jumped, if your boss or your coworker or whoever jumped immediately to how can I hurt you to make you remember this harder, versus what in yourself or your environment or your circumstances can I change to support you, then even if the threat of whatever really did make you think about it really hard and really did make you find your own accommodation solution so that you could do it, it would hurt your relationship with that person. Like you'd be walking around thinking like, this person, they just threatened me.
Yeah. I think a lot of consequence decisions do, even the gentlest, impact the relationship if the adult hasn't really tried to figure out what's going on. I think like even something as common and seemingly simple as the child who won't sit still in quotes during a story time or whatever. And so we send them away to sit in the timeout or whatever. There's so much damage to relationship with the teacher who didn't understand or see me or take any time to figure out what was going on with me. And even then in the community, because those children who are still in the circle learn there's something wrong with the kid who keeps getting sent out of the circle. And so those relationships are impacted.
I had a kid who I was working with in there's pull out setting and then there's push in setting. And I usually significantly prefer pull out for a lot of reasons that are not the point of this podcast. I understand the purposes of wanting to keep them with their peers as much as possible, but I find that the work that I do usually works better when they aren't feeling looked at and they aren't, and they're feeling, safe and not distracted by all the other kids. Anyway, lots of things. This kid had an IEP coming into the school and the IEP said push in. And so until we had a meeting to change it legally, I needed to follow what was on the IEP. And so I was doing push in a setting for a lot of reasons, even more than just my own personal philosophies, wasn't working well. And so I was supposed to be helping this poor second grader. She was like 8 or 9. And they were doing like a little writing and reading worksheet together, and they were supposed to be doing it in like little groups of 4. And she was like severely dyslexic, and the work was like so far over her head. And what I was supposed to be working on with her was like her like handwriting and pencil grip and all of this default OT stuff. And so she's just like sitting there with the paper in her lap, and she had kind of this like fake frozen smile like you do when you're uncomfortable in a situation and don't know what else to do. And the other 3 girls in her group were working together with one another but they wouldn't slow down enough for her to write any of the things down or tell her what any of the words said, because they said, she's just not trying. She should know how to read this stuff by now.
Oh
She's
my
in
gosh.
second grade.
Yeah.
And she doesn't pay any attention, and she doesn't even remember words like the, and she doesn't know any of the sight words. And she was just sitting there, like, again, with like this fake smile, just kind of staring at her lap like she didn't know what to do. And I also didn't know what to do, despite being the adult. And so I ended up just like pulling her a little bit to the side so that we could just like work together. And then I talked to the teacher about it later, but I was just thinking, like, that framework isn't one that was invented by other 7-year-olds. Like, other 7-year-olds are not the ones who said, you're not paying attention in class, and you're not doing the work, and you're not even trying to remember these sight words. Like, they weren't the first ones to say that.
Mm-hmm.
They were picking up that modeling
Yeah.
from somebody else. And they didn't say it in these words, but they could just as well have said, the natural consequence is we're not going to help you on this paper because you're not even able to help us.
Mm-hmm.
So why, this is supposed to be a team assignment.
Yeah.
Why would we help you? You can't even read the words. The natural consequence is you have to do it yourself. And that was a completely unreasonable thing because she couldn't even do the thing to begin with. And that sounds so outrageous to any adult listening to it that they're like, well, of course, she couldn't even do the thing to begin with. Yeah. But when I think about consequences, I'm thinking about a thing that my kid is completely capable of doing. And that's exactly why it's totally appropriate for me to punish them.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that if there's something in the way, then there's something in the way, whether it sounds like a valid reason for you or not.
Right. I think one of the things that the framework of consequences does is it puts the responsibility squarely on the child to change. And it sort of puts the problem outside of me. This problem clearly just lives in the child, sits on their shoulders. And there's only so much I can do if they aren't willing to try. Right. And if they're not willing to try, we need to make it we need to make the not trying unpleasant, whatever that is. And it's just so natural because we've all grown up with it. Mm-hmm. And some of us have been explicitly taught it in our coursework and our teacher prep or our, whatever we're doing to prepare for our work with children. And, it just sort of pathologizes instead of humanizes. That's what I loved about what your work down in the comments was, that you would give those two alternatives.
I was gonna,
one was really pathologizing and one was really humanizing. Yeah.
That because some people really gave good examples where they're like, but are you saying that this isn't what the end result would look like? And I'm like, no, if I was in that situation, that is probably what the end result would look like, but my mental framework behind it would be different. And that might sound like I'm just being pedantic about it, but I actually think that the mental framework behind it is a really important component of it. So I don't feel like this one was too personal or anything, but somebody gave the example of a kid screaming in a movie theater. That one felt public enough to not be
several kids. Out. I think it was several kids screaming in the theater.
Yeah. Well, if it was me, it would be a maximum of 2 kids. So if I was the one parenting, but yeah, they were trying to watch a movie and kids were screaming in the theater, and their feeling was like, isn't it a natural or a logical consequence to take the kid out of the theater? And I was like, well, first of all, the natural consequence of yelling in a theater is that it is loud in the theater. That's the natural consequence is the thing that just happens by itself. The logical consequence might be you should take the kid out of the theater.
Right.
But then I was like, so imagine two scenarios with 2 different parents, and both scenarios begin with kid yelling in theater, and both scenarios end with parent removing child from theater. Because it's not that I'm saying that that's an unreasonable end result. But parent 1 is thinking, I warned him and he's still yelling and running up and down the aisles. So the logical consequence for this is that I'm going to pick him up and take him out, because that'll show him that he should have sat down and listened when I told him that he should have. Yeah. And the second parent is thinking oh boy, we were not ready to sit through a whole movie yet, huh? Okay, well, that's how, that's how it is. He's just too wiggly at this age, and this movie is too long, so we're gonna get up and go. Yeah. And even if neither parent ever says that out loud, it's still going to affect how they move with their body and how they the demeanor with which they pick up their child.
I like how they handle the child's body.
Yeah, the way that they talk about it to their partner or their friend when they get out of the theater and explain why they're out of the theater, and the way that the child then hears their self being talked about, and I think that those invisible parts of it are actually also important, even though even if they didn't go out and talk about it in front of the kid, even if all they ever did was silently pick up the child and leave, and the child was just reading the parents' vibes about it, I still think then, even with no other external thing ever, I still think that it actually makes a difference what the vibes are.
I'm with you on that.
Because I'm talking about myself. I thought of an example that I can give that it only embarrasses me and nobody else.
And I want to be clear, I wasn't when I said several children, that tickled me, the idea.
Several
children screaming in the theater.
But so like my kid has spilled many things before, and some of them have been more accidental and some of them have been more on purpose or via silliness or carelessness or whatever. And I have absolutely had times where I've been like, well, you need to clean it up, and my kid won't clean it up, and I have physically hand over hand tried to take my child's hand and arm and force them to clean something up with a towel that I am really holding and moving. But I'm like dragging them along for the ride, and everybody is mad about it. And you could say that is a logical consequence. Like, oh, they didn't clean it up. So they spilled it. So the logical consequence is that they have to clean it up. The natural consequence of spilling something is that it is on the floor or the couch.
It's such a great distinction.
The natural consequence is just whatever happens with no intervention whatsoever. But yes, it is logical to say you spilled this, you have to clean it up. But the only reason I've ever done that is because I personally, Kelsie, was feeling stressed out and angry about it, or feeling like, man, you make messes all the time and you never clean up anything, and I just clean up all day long, and blah, blah, blah. And it never had to do with my kid. It really had to do with me. It makes a lot of sense that my kid kind of freezes when I'm approaching him again with that vibe of like, woe is me. I have to clean up your mess all day long. And you just don't even care. And in the times when I haven't been stressed out and when I've been like able to take enough of a step back or enough of a pause, I have seen that usually the like, just like immediate embarrassment of having spilled something, whether by total accident or by like what looks to me like carelessness, usually the embarrassment of it freezes him for a couple of minutes before he can do anything about it. And if I say nothing or react to it in no way, or just like super casually put a towel nearby, then in an amount of time that feels like more time than it would take me to move my hand back and forth to clean it with a towel, but in an amount of time that accounts for him having to process at a slower rate than I do, which I already know he does, because both he's a child and because of his unique neurodivergence. And then he'll sometimes clean it up, or sometimes he won't and he'll walk away. But also I've tripped and fallen while holding things, and he's rushed over and been like, "Mommy, I got you a towel. Let me help you clean it up." Because it's like, I have no shame in this situation. None of it involved me and my clumsiness. I would love to help you because you're a member of my family and I love you. And so like, I don't need to like do this like thing where I project a million years into the future and I'm like, he's never going to take responsibility as an adult because he dropped a strawberry one time on the carpet and blah, blah, blah. Like what, like where, that only ever comes from me having my own well be running dry. Like, that doesn't have anything to do with him. And I feel like that's the case in a lot of, especially I think that for, many parents, it's just the default and they haven't ever questioned it. But for parents who have questioned it and yet still find themselves falling back into like, oh, well, what else am I supposed to do kind of rut, I think that it's got its roots in sometimes fear, sometimes helplessness, sometimes embarrassment, especially if like other people are around and so you feel like you have to do something or else they didn't learn anything from it. And I think there could be a lot of other emotions too. And I don't think that any of them are like super duper like confident, like decision making type emotions. They're like this scared, hurt, I don't know what else to do. I don't know how to make this better. I don't know how to make you into a competent adult someday. Like those types of like fearful things that aren't the well from which I want to draw when I'm parenting anyway. They're not the thing that I want to build this on.
And with our concerns so far in the future, we forget about what the child's experience is, and ours too, what our relational experience is in that moment, and the messages about competence and acceptance and second chances and all that get really muddy. If nothing else, if we can practice a pause, if that can be our like first thing.
Probably the one most like profound difference in my parenting journey, and also it affects my OT journey a lot too, is that I literally just have spent so much time being like, how about I think about this for like more than 1/8 of a second before I react to it? Like, how about I did, because I really grew up with this almost the like new the new learning, the like new big great child development like thing was that like, oh well, like we used to punish kids by being like, okay, well like wait till your father gets home, and that's in like 5 hours, and then like the kid doesn't even remember it. So what you have to do is you have to do something right away. Right away. It has to be right away, or else the kid can't
remember the teachable moments,
all this stuff. Yes. And I think that destroyed the ability to like it doesn't mean that if you respond in 5 seconds instead of in 1 second that the kid like will have, unless they're like literally like 1 year old or whatever, it probably doesn't evaporate that fast, but like you can take a second to think, has been the biggest thing to me, to message to me.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of the folks who listen to this are working with kids, birth to 5 or before they go to elementary school. And especially in those ages, like I think 0 to 3, which is a national organization here in the States, because you're in the UK, right? We didn't talk about that.
I am from the US, and I have dabbled in EI, but I am living in England. Yes.
Yeah, I just thought people would think it was weird that I said here in the States. But anyway, they did like a survey, and they asked parents, at what age do you think impulse control is there? Like, at what age do you think you should be able to just say, and they do? And, most parents thought it started and was a reasonable expectation about 18 months old. And I've definitely worked with early childhood teachers who think that, and that's so much earlier.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Like,
without considering any, neurodivergence or individual difference, even just outside of labels. And so realizing that that's where a lot of us are starting, that pause becomes so valuable.
And the other like big half of that, both parents think that just verbally saying something should be enough, and then also that like everything that they're verbally saying is like totally being understood.
Yeah.
Because a kid did something once, then it means that they can do it in all situations forever.
Yes.
Like there's like this like trio of
and it's just a function. It's just a function of being smart enough. Like we're only thinking about them from the neck up. You're smart enough to follow this, to do this, to remember this.
I will sometimes say, which can be like such and such, which can be really hard to remember when you are talking to eloquent small people. Because, because people will be like, well, my 2-year-old could repeat the instructions, so that means that they can do them at all times and in all places and with only a verbal command from 50 feet away, and it's like, no, dude, they're 2. They've been in the earth for 2 years.
I think sometimes those developmental checklists that are supposed to help adults understand children confuse this, because they'll say things like follows 1-step direction, followed 2-step direction, and that translates into our adult minds as obedience and behavior situations, and not give me your shoe.
It's one of those things where when you try to take something and explain it with absolutely no jargon from the field that you're in.
Yeah.
And the more that you try to simplify it down, the more you basically have to like lie in order to do that, because like you have to make it so simple that it's like no longer even true.
Yeah.
So you'll be like, well, what I want to assess is like, do they hear you say the word no, and do they turn and do they look at you, and then do they continue to do the thing anyway because that's developmentally appropriate, and like, do they seem like they care about your input at all, or like they acknowledge that you have spoken to them? But then like the questionnaire will say that, and what it will say is like, you know, when you say no, do they know what that means? And they think it means like, oh yeah, they follow the obedient, like they obey the command no from a distance when they're like 18 months old or whatever. And it's like, no, they don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do we do about this all? What should we be doing if not using the word consequence?
So
I mean, you've touched on that, of course, as we go through, but I want to end.
Well, and then the other interesting thing that I was unaware of in the comments was how many people are like, yes, this is why I say limits and boundaries, and then proceeded to like describe the
same
thing, but now with a new word on it. And I was like, dang it, don't take that one from me. Like, hang on, stop. Because people were like, a boundary is when you say, if you keep doing X, then I'm going to X. And I was like, that's not a boundary. That's a threat.
That's a threat.
Like, if you're like, and again, it's like one of those things where it sounds semantic, or like I'm just being super pedantic about it, but like the difference could be with the thing that's in your head. Because if you're saying, I'm trying to think of something that I routinely say to my kids. Oh, I'll be like, well, because I really don't word it in threat form, but I guess I could if I was not thinking about my language or whatever. I could see myself conceivably being like, hey, if you're not going to brush your teeth, then I can help you. And, and there could be
we do that. Do you want me to help you? We do that.
I have said that sometimes through gritted teeth. I still think that keeping the language helps me keep my mind in the right place, even when my mind is like, I'm going to help you. Like, super angry about it. But I could see one parent being like, hey, if you're not going to brush your teeth, then I'm going to help you.
That's what I mean.
Everything about that completely conveys like, you brush your teeth or else, you know. And if I am at a point where if I say those words, I am legitimately just being like, do you want, it's an actual question. It's not a leading question. Do you want to brush your teeth, or do you want me to help you brush your teeth? Like, which one would you prefer? Because my kid routinely prefers both. And so that's the only reason why I would say that. I think I would be more likely, I usually by toothbrushing time, then everybody's really tapped out. So I'm more likely to just hand a toothbrush in his direction and say no words at all, because he's more likely to take it and then just start brushing or whatever. But or be like, I'm too tired, and lay down and just open his mouth, and then I brush his teeth. So but if I was saying it would be a legitimate question. If I'm saying, there's like things where they sound like threats, or they could be used as threats, and it's not just like a magic incantation where if you say the right words, then you are not threatening your kid or whatever. It's super duper like a mindset shift first, to like, again, step completely out of this framework where you are thinking like the way that kids learn is either through like trial and error, cause and effect, or through aversives of some kind. Something has to feel bad or you know, unhappy or negative about the situation that I don't want them to do again, in order for them to never do it again. Like it's not that simple for many, many reasons. And it is a lot slower, and it is a lot of like setting the groundwork. And for kids 0 to 5, and especially 0 to 3, it is a lot more active and hands-on. To like legitimately be like, listen, if you haven't demonstrated a skill, like you will know that they can do it when they do it, and you will know that they can do it reliably when they do it reliably. And I assume that my kid wants to be like me, because everything that they ever do shows how much they want to be like me. And so I assume that my kid generally wants, when my kid's feeling good and loved and connected with me, my kid generally wants to go along with what I want to do on the things that are important. And I don't spend so much of my parenting capital on the things that are unimportant that it, that it's just like an endless string of demands forever and ever. And so they run out at some point.
Yeah.
And all of these things are like so many just like things in my head that aren't things that I have even pulled, even before I approach my kid, even before I've pulled them in on it. And so like, it is tiring. It is hard to like set that groundwork. And also mine are 4 and 5. And it's not like I think we're coming out the other side yet or anything, but I have read people saying that like 0 to 3 is like where you're the most setting the groundwork. And if you can do that, then you're in a really good place for the rest of their childhood, for the rest of their life. And I can already see like the tiniest little seeds of that at 4 and 5, but I can already see it. I really can, that like that even when I get super mad for no real good reason and, like fall into some parenting style I shouldn't or whatever, like we bounce back from it because there's this whole entire background of connection capital that I've built with them. And I can say like, that was wrong of me and I'm sorry. And that's not how I want to be your mom, and they can like believe that I mean that because I like show it as much of the time as possible,
Yeah. And I think that, translates to early childhood teachers too, and caregivers and other folks who are in power, potential positions of power.
I find
over young children.
That in my OT role, it's both a blessing and a curse because if the kid has no real good relationships with any other adults in their life, then that's just like heartbreaking in every way. But I find that they're usually desperate for the one adult who will, and so like whether it puts you in especially with 0 to 5, like especially with 0 to 5 because they're not even old enough to be like jaded, like because I have some who are like 10 or whatever, and it takes longer to be like, no, I really am a reliable adult. But like a 3-year-old will like, they'll trust you pretty fast if you
at least try you out pretty reliable.
Quickly. Yeah. They're typically, I mean, there's obviously situations with severe trauma and things like that, but typically speaking, they'll recognize an adult who's on their side pretty fast. And even if they haven't had great experiences with adults in the past, they're still like, oh, hey, here's one who's like they're supposed to be like. I knew it. Something in me innately knew it,
Yeah. It's that vibe again. It's that
right.
That
it
vibe
really is. And I like how my parenting bleeds into my OT and my OT bleeds into my parenting because I can feel times where I'm like, can feel myself pause in a way that I would do better at work than I do at home because I'm not around my work kids 24 hours a day.
The context is so different.
Yeah, they haven't been doing things that annoy me since they were like, like 4 months old and learned how to pterodactyl screech. So they're but I can feel times where I'm like, oh wait, I can have the patience that I have at work. Like I can just try it. I can just try being that type of adult with you, can't I? And then my kids are like, yeah, you can, you totally can. Not verbally, just behaviorally. Although they have both picked up on the like super duper preschool phrase, you're my best friend, you're not my best friend.
Oh, sure.
So they're both constantly telling me that I am or am not their best friend, given on whether I'm like giving them snacks or making them go to bed at any given moment.
Yeah.
But well, if we're all like sitting and just enjoy, like if we're doing anything and we're all content and we're all enjoying each other's presence, they'll be like, Mom, you're my best friend. And I'm like, thanks, bud. I love you too.
That's always a big topic of discussion too. It's just the language they have for the feeling they're feeling. Yeah. But it's so funny.
I think that,
when you're looking at it from outside of the emotion.
Right. I think that having kids who had real interesting like language journeys to being able to speak made me like real predisposed to take no kid language literally, like almost ever. I just like run it through a translator before I ever even think about it about anything. And so that one is always real funny to me when people are freaking out about super non-literal language.
Right. That's a whole other episode.
It is, I know. You want to talk tomorrow?
Yeah.
I can just talk and talk and talk.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to have you on again. So it's about time to wrap up a little bit, but I want to ask, what were there things you wanted to say that you haven't been able to share yet, or thoughts about the post or the ideas?
I think that if people can Dr. Ross Greene has the kids do well if they can framework, and that's a real hard one to wrap your head around when you are coming from a totally different framework that you've never heard that before, or you've never thought that before, because it's real easy to look at your kid not doing well and be like, no, this is because they're choosing not to, or this is because this is because something, like you said, the locus of the problem is in the child and not in something else. And so it can be really hard, especially I think I don't know whether all of your listeners are in the States, but nope. there's a really built-in like American individual responsibility, individualism, and the most important thing in the world is independence. And that's a super baked into American culture in a way that people will be like telling me that they want like independent, like my child needs to be dressing independently, or my child needs to be X independently by the time they're like 2 or whatever. And I'm like, hold up. Like sometimes people need help for longer than that. Even people without any kind of delay or struggle or anything just need help for longer than that. But
and sometimes asking for your help with something they already know how to do is just asking for a connection.
Oh, absolutely. Like, yes, sometimes you just like love your mom and want to hang out with her, or you love your dad and want to hang out with him. Like that's a like good thing. But I think that I think that kind of societal expectation underlies the thing where it's like, and so if you ever, if something is ever going wrong, it is your fault. Like that's very baked into American society in a way that it's not globally. In both kids and adults, and like like tragedies, like it's like a thing that like truly permeates society because of religious factors, because of historical factors, because a lot of things. There's this really big message that if something goes wrong, it is your fault, and that gets applied to kids in ways in which it's like not developmentally appropriate. And so it's like it is a big, powerful cultural, societal, whole entire upbringing, whatever factors it is for an individual parent who's trying to decide that like they want to try to buy into something different. It is big to shift your thinking from everything that my kid does wrong, air quotes around wrong, everything that my kid does that I don't like, the fault of it is on them, to like they would be doing well if they could, and so if they can't, then something is in their way, and I am a person on their team who can help them move that thing out of their way, maybe. But that's like where that's like the groundwork of where all of this started for me, and for a lot of people. And oh gosh, I could like literally do so many episodes on this.
Well, you just make a list.
And I hope I'm not stepping way out of bounds with this one, but I want to just touch on something that I could probably talk about for 10 hours, which is that the religious context is a big part of it for me and my personal history.
Me too,
and is a real big part of it for a lot of people in the States, whether just because of their history and how they were raised, or something that they still believe, or something that they once believed but don't anymore. But there's like kind of a culturally religious, but not necessarily actively religious belief of like kids are inherently bad, kids are inherently trying to defy what you say, kids are inherently disobedient. and the shift to like kids are really trying to close to you, kids are really trying to do their best, kids are probably have thoughts in their head that don't have to do with just how can they make your life harder. All of those things are like they can be a shockingly big shift, especially to someone who doesn't have any of those factors. They might look at that and be like, what the heck are you talking about? But it's like a really big thing for some people, and it's a hard hurdle to get over, but there are people out there who have. You're not the only one doing that journey or thinking that for the first time, that maybe your kid isn't actually super duper horribly terrible and evil from birth. Even if they like look like they're laughing while they're doing something that you don't want them to do, or even if you think that they repeated back your exact instructions, or whatever a million scenarios are. And that's one that I have a lot of grace and a lot of care for people, because it has a lot to do with my own personal journey and stuff like that. So
well, and whatever the reason, if you've been raised in that kind of a framework, it's not just questioning how you're responding, it's questioning, did my mom screw up? Like, I love my mom. She was a great mom, but that again, a whole other insert length of time conversation.
Just be like, here, this is the consequences episode, and then we can do the like generational trauma episode.
This has been really fun for me. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation.
I absolutely love it when somebody points me at a topic and I just ramble and ramble.
That's kind of why I started the podcast, so I could do it. And trick people into talking to me about things that we think are cool. So I mentioned that I found you on Facebook. Where can people find you if they want to get more of this?
Facebook has the most of everything, but I do post on Instagram. I'm gonna be honest, I don't post on Instagram as much because of the character limit. Because when somebody tries to tell me, we would like you to ramble, but it needs to be 2,200 characters long, and I'm just like, never mind, I'm not even gonna talk to you. But I do try to cross post on there sometimes, because people will be like, I don't use Facebook. I'm like, I know. I have a website, which is www.occuplaytional.com. I am trying to get all of my Facebook posts ported over to that website, but right now I have about 210 of them. Wow. But there's a lot more than that on the Facebook. The website is a million times more searchable. It has categories across the top. It has tags on the side, and it has a search bar, so you can search like by the age. So maybe your listeners would be most interested in babies, toddlers, preschoolers. I've got all of those ages on there.
Great.
You can search like autism or ADHD specifically. You can search like by like activities or by philosophy, by like fine motor, sensory, child development. Like, it's got lots and lots of categories to try to help people find what it is that they're actually looking for. Versus Facebook is kind of, you just get a stream of whatever comes out of my mind. But you do get the community of it on Facebook. And it's a really lovely, it's genuinely, I've only had like a couple of times where people have been real mean in the comments. And the vast majority of the time, everybody is really lovely. And even when this was a real contentious one when I posted it, but people were still like, listen, I usually agree with you. This one is really throwing me. Can you please help me understand what you're talking about? Nobody's like comment section some places on the internet where people are like, you're stupid and everything you say is stupid and I hate you, so
you're not my best friend.
You're not my best friend, and you're not invited to my birthday party.
I have so much respect for people who get into the community of their comments. I don't use my Facebook the same way like that you do. I'm self-promotion kind of stuff, but when I used to put more of that kind of post out there, I generally just dropped it and ran.
That's fair. And I do have
I just think it's great.
I do have posts like that, or I'll be like, hey, I'm gonna drop this, I'm gonna keep comments open for 1 hour, and after that they are closed because my brain needs a break. But
there you go.
But I do really love getting to talk to people, because I'm just a talker. So
well, that works out perfectly for podcasting.
It does.
All right, well, thank you again for your time, and I hope we get to talk again for
Let's
more
do it.
episodes in the future. So that was Kelsie Olds, the occupational therapist.
Therapist,
my,
yeah.
my words stopped working. And thank you all for listening to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd.